what I realized was the power and control that you have in television and film, especially television, news and broadcasting. You really control what people see, and what people allow into their homes through their television is actually really controlled by the people who get to determine what you see or not.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Valor Vision Podcast. I'm your host, Nick, if this is your first time with us, and we're super excited to jump into this episode. But first and foremost, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any more episodes of the Valor Vision Podcast. And so today, my guest is Michael Klassen. Let me read off a bio for him as we dive into this. So he is a seasoned media professional, the visionary and co-founder of the 5 a.m. podcast, which he has launched in 2019 alongside his wife, Susan, with a background spanning broadcast television, video production, and project management. Michael brings a wealth of industry experience and storytelling expertise to his work as a host and producer. Through the 5 a.m. podcast, Michael has built a growing worldwide audience by helping people transform their mornings through intentional living, gratitude, and abundance mindset. His engaging interview style and practical approach to personal development have made the podcast a valuable resource for listeners looking for business insights, lifestyle improvements, and motivational guidance. In 2025, Michael and his team expanded the 5 a.m. podcast platform even further by introducing audio-visual episodes across major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, allowing the message to reach an even broader audience. At the heart of Michael's work is a mission to equip people with practical tools and inspiration to seize each day and give a greater purpose and productivity to each of his viewers. And when he's not in the studio, Michael enjoys spending some time outdoors and expressing his creativity through woodwork. So, which is always good to know. If you need a table, call him up, right? Kind of deal. And then on top of that, he brings a powerful blend of media expertise, creative vision, and a passion for intentional living in every conversation. Michael, welcome to the show. How we doing?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Doing great, and looking
Awesome.
forward to a great conversation with you.
Awesome, man. So, we have the 5 a.m. podcast. We have all of what you've done. You have the TV background, but tell us about who you are. Like, how did you grow up? What were your parents like? All that kind of stuff. What was little Michael, doing to kind of build into where you are now?
I do like to answer that kind of question because it is fun to go back and think about those things and the fond memories. Sometimes when we go through life, I don't know about me I don't know about you or your listeners, but for me, sometimes it's always like the accuser thoughts that come to us if you did this wrong. And man, I bet people remembers that time you embarrassed yourself. But so it's good to be able to frame things as we want to remember them and enjoy. And so I grew up on a farm. We didn't seem to have a lot of the money or the trappings of the world. And that was probably true for a lot of our neighbors as well. We were all not completely subsistence farming, but even if you lived on a farm, your parents probably had jobs. And so we had chores as children. And we were an integral part of making sure that the farm ran. And part of that training really became, part of that training was a lot about respect and responsibility. And so, and you have to learn this from somewhere. And I have this analogy of, thinking back to how our parents were. So, my parents were strict. They kept us very disciplined, keep us on that disciple plane. And I'm thankful for that now, but I know our friends and relatives would be like, I'm not even going to ask your mom or dad because I know they're going to say no because they were just very strict. And I'm thankful for that now. And I knew that there was value in that. And part of that discipline, which we all need, was going to church on Sundays or going to youth group on Fridays, Wednesday night Bible study, sometimes, not always. But it was discipline and it was following what the Lord may be speaking to you, as opposed to what is the human on the stage speaking to you. So I think I also got a good training in being suspicious of either the man behind the curtain or the one on the stage. And so growing up on a farm, we had to, like it talks about in Proverbs, and I love to read the Proverbs. There's one proverb for every day of the month,
Mm-hmm.
and it is so beneficial. And it talks about how a wise man or a wise woman is going to know the condition of their flocks. And that responsibility was instilled in us, that the animals had to eat first. We would go do the chores and then come in and have breakfast. We would do the evening chores and feed the animals and then come in and have supper. And it really talked about understanding staff who would later come to work for me or I would co-labor with. There was also a lot of freedom of being on the farm, being able to shoot guns and
Mm-hmm.
and learn where food actually comes from, and that something has to die. Even if you're not a meat eater, there's a plant that has to die. There's fruit and there's seed that is not going to get to live out its destiny because you're going to consume it for your life. And that's okay. That's great, actually. That's the purpose of the animals and the floral and fauna around us,
Mm-hmm.
is that they're here so that we can be fruitful and multiply. And that was definitely something I got from the farm, of growing up in a large family, being one of 5 siblings, a middle child, and having those times of not just being able to shoot and fish and know that we're raising these animals up and we can't get attached to them because they're going to be on our plate one day and in the deep freeze. And but also exploring woods and learning how to trap, or at least thinking you're learning how to trap. And fun fact, no one will sleep any better knowing this, but I had a lot of friends whose dads were hunters. And we
Mm-hmm.
lived in a rural area. There was a lot to hunt. And my dad would always say, well, that's not for us because we're farmers. So we grow our own food. We don't have to go hunt and take an animal out of the wild. And so even that in itself, that idea was stewardship of, we don't actually need to consume that because we've already created our own. And
Mm-hmm.
that power of creation, of knowing that as a farmer, you're actually creating food and clothing and shelter, not just for God's creation and animals, but also for our fellow humans. And my parents would often trade food for honey. We'd always have like a 4-liter pail of honey in the house
Mm-hmm.
somewhere because my parents were trading and trade for, so you hear about the homesteading lifestyle. Well, people were doing that out of necessity instead of by choice
Mm-hmm.
all those years ago.
Yeah, now
And
it's like trendy or something,
yes, that's right. Trendy homesteads. Oh, we could start a YouTube channel, Nick,
Gee.
about that. And so that was the farming life. I went to Bible college. That's where I met my loving and lovely wife, Susan. And I always had a desire and enjoyment of television and film. And so that's kind of where my career took me. Was working in film and television, not so much film, very little film, but mostly television broadcasting. They're two different worlds, two different ways
Mm-hmm.
of doing things. And I was on a film set for several weeks for one contract that we had, and I much more enjoyed and was much more used to the world of broadcasting, sports and news and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and was able to put that knowledge into 5 a.m. podcast. Here we are today.
That's awesome. So clearly you were raised with a faith background. Your parents were very involved in church and all of that, which is, good and all that. So there was no, like, when did you go? Because we say this in the church all the time, but you're not born a Christian. You have to make that decision for yourself at some point and say, yes, what I'm being told and what I'm learning, I accept that as my faith. I accept what Christ did on that cross and all of that. Tell us about that. When did it become not just mom and dad's faith, but it's my
Yeah,
faith now?
that's great. Yes, because God has no grandchildren. We all have to get grafted in on our own. And so my younger brother Daryl and I were sitting in front. My parents loved music. And so just to set the stage, we had this big hi-fi. There's a record player, radio player, speakers all built into it. It's like 6 feet wide, 2 feet deep. It's actually downstairs in our house. I get to be the keeper of it. And many, many good memories of my parents bringing home a record and the whole family gathering around, us little boys sitting in front of it, listening to the sound and the vibrations, the waves coming out of that box. And so One night, my younger brother Daryl and I were sitting in front of the hi-fi system listening to a show called Back to the Bible, and Warren Wiersbe was the host at the time. And we would listen to that show all the time. And so I was listening to that. My dad was busy doing something, getting ready to do some of the evening things of kind of wrapping up the household. And I was asking for his assistance in responding to this call of salvation, call to action to accept Jesus as your savior. And so my dad just said, "Hey man, just listen to what he's telling you. I can't give you better instructions than that. He's the man with the
Hmm.
script." And so I said the prayer along with him and meant it. And it was something that I've lived my life with ever since.
Hmm.
Fortunate to have grandparents and great grandparents and so on who were also believers in the faith.
Right. Do you feel like there was any kind of, when you're grown up in that, and clearly it's not even just your immediate parents, but even your extended family, like you're very entrenched in a Christian network all around you. Did you almost feel like this was just a continuation, or was there even an internal heart change that you felt, or because you get a lot of these stories of other people that were you get, hey, I didn't know anything about church, all of that, and it changes so much in their life. But this was something you grew up with all the time. This is kind of part of your character and nature already. And so I don't know. Talk to us a little bit.
Yes. Well, and it's a good question to ask because some people might say, you're just brainwashed into the into the
Hmm.
club. But it comes back to that, like my father's instruction was, hey, this is something you do on your own. I mean, it's your choice that you're making. If you're gonna do it, you're gonna
Hmm.
follow the instructions that you're given. I'm not gonna sway you one way or another. And so even at that young age, I knew that it was a decision that I was making that I wanted to make. And it was also then something similar to taking the responsibility for the animals. I was taking then a responsibility for this commitment that I made, that I know that Jesus fulfilled the contract, but I have a role to play in that as well, in that I need to submit myself to becoming a disciple. And I saw a lot of cautionary tales around me of people having trials and tribulations from bad decisions that the Bible and let's like the book of Proverbs, they warn against certain things. And I did not
Hmm.
like pain. I didn't like discomfort. I didn't like those unpleasant conversations, experiences, yelling, and all that emotional drama that comes from life. And so I found that Jesus Christ and Christianity was indeed a solid foundation. And so I wasn't going to blame him for the proclivities and the evil that was going on around me in other people's lives. I also knew that I didn't have the alcoholic parents that my friends had.
Hmm.
I wasn't getting physically abused like some of my other friends were. I knew that there was an extreme difference between how my parents lived, how our house even smelled because my parents weren't smokers, and different kinds of immorality that was around me. I knew that our home was different and felt different because of that choice that my parents and grandparents and generations had made to follow the teachings of the Bible instead of the proclivities and the appetites of the flesh and the world.
Hmm.
So that was a great help in knowing to make the right decisions and not the wrong decisions.
You've said something just now that honestly, I hear the opposite of from a lot of others that say that, hey, yeah, my parents had faith and we went to church, but I still didn't see a difference in my parents compared to non-Christian parents. And you just nailed it on the head with my parents, probably not perfect, but did it a lot better than a lot of others, or just in general, you could clearly see your parents emulating what Christ has said for us to live and how to live and like New Testament, live a quiet and meek life, all of this kind of stuff. And compared to other families that are not following that, not doing that. And it gave you this solid vision of, nope, I don't want to live in that home. I'm
Yeah,
very blessed where I'm at and that
that's
realization. And so I
yes.
don't think a lot of people get that though. Like what age are you thinking that that's coming about in your mind? Like, wow, I don't live like that.
Well, I would say even in elementary school, in so
Mhm.
those ages of maybe 7, 8, up until 10 or 12, especially around 10, 8 to 10. We're going to Bible camp already, and we're bringing our friends, our unchurched friends, non-Christian friends to Bible camp or vacation Bible school. But growing up on a farm, you have to be observant. Like, you have to pay attention. You don't want to lose an arm in an auger or something like that. So you're
Yeah.
forced to I don't want to say be hyper vigilant, but be vigilant and to
Hmm.
understand that uh, life could end with an accident, with making a mistake. And life can be dangerous, physically dangerous on a farm. My
Hmm.
city dwelling cousins did not have those same dangers. They had other dangers. Part of what I was seeing that I would later as a teenage, like a older teenager, when I um, really bit into John 10:10. Looking back, what I was observing was that kingdom of stealing, killing, and destroying versus living in a kingdom of light and abundance. I knew that my parents loved me. They didn't always seem to love each other. I knew that they would never lie to me. I just knew that. I had grown up to know that they would speak the truth. They would discipline us for our benefit. And who loves that? Nobody loves that. But we realized that, somebody could give you the instructions of, hey, if you don't murder anybody and you don't commit adultery and you don't steal so that you get caught and go to jail, you'll have a pretty good life. So that could be someone's, hey, just follow these three simple rules. But the Bible says that we can love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, and soul. We can live in a kingdom of abundance, and we can shun and do away with the kingdom of stealing, killing, and destroying in our lives. And
Hmm.
if someone's telling you, hey, you just don't have to steal, kill, and destroy in your life and you'll be fine. Sure, I get that. But there's this king and this kingdom of abundance and light and love. And man, it's so much better to be in that kingdom than the other kingdom. So it's a bit of a rabbit trail from your question, but looking back, I was observing that, maybe not putting those same words to it, but I was observing that my parents were the best that they could living out their Christian faith. And they also made that choice of what they wanted their personal lives to be like and what they wanted their home to be like, and that foundation that they would help their children to grow on. So very grateful for that.
That's awesome. So you leave, you're like, hey, I'm going to go to college. And instead of farming or agriculture or botany or like any of the things that you would think, man, I'm going to major in this, you go, I'm going to do TV.
Yes.
And so tell me about how that went and really some of your TV background with broadcasting and everything.
Well, I actually wanted to be a medical doctor as a boy. My mom was a nurse, and oftentimes after school, if we didn't take the bus out to the farm, we would walk over to the hospital, ride home with her. And I remember thinking as a young boy, I would love it to I could be the doctor. I could get my mom and maybe a couple of aunts that are nurses. They could work for me in my medical clinic. But I got to 10th grade and I did not have the grade. And my counselors in school actually said, we don't need doctors. So we're not going to put you in those classes that you need. And so then I was like, okay, well, I love watching TV. So I guess let's make some television happen. And so started producing at a community TV station in my gap year between high school and college, and learning those skills and learning the management skills required for having control over getting, 28 minutes 30 seconds is what we would make a half hour show. And so being able to take the skills that I learned, which I didn't realize that I was taking them at that time, of learning how to put a show together. I had a couple of really great mentors that took me under their wing, and I produced a Christian music video show called Cross Rock for 4 seasons. So through college, then I got some other work, and I just enjoyed it. And what I realized was the power and control that you have in television and film, especially television,
Hmm.
news and broadcasting. You really control what people see, and what people allow into their homes through their television is actually really controlled by the people who get to determine what you see or not. And a great example of this was I produced a lot of hockey games. And in hockey
Okay.
games, you have a lot of fights.
Hmm.
And we would not always show fights our network. And I realized the power of television. It really like sunk into me one day when there was this big fight going on. We had some packed stories already. So the packed stories are just, there's something special about some player and some journalist that works for us has made a story that's 2.5 minutes, and we're going to run that. So we usually have more of these in the truck that we can play. So this big fight took place. We didn't show any of it. We went to a few pack stories and some other stuff that we had. And I had this thought came into me of these 5 or 7,000 people that are watching this. Someone's at home watching the game, never sees the fight. They go to work the next morning and their buddy Alan was at the game. And so the guy that watched it on TV says, "Hey, did you watch the game last night? Boy, wasn't that great? The team did great. They won 5-2, man. And did you see that, that third period goal with like just a few minutes or a few seconds left?" But then Alan, who was sitting in the stands on the center line behind the home team's bench, said, "Yeah, but did you see the bench clearing brawl?" And his coworker will not actually believe the eyewitness. He'll believe what he saw on television. He'll say, "There was no fight. What are you talking about that? I watched the whole thing. When did that happen?" "Oh, like in between first and second period." I was like, "No, that never happened. I watched the entire thing." And Alan would be like, "Yeah, but I was sitting on the center line, 10 rows up from behind the home team bench. I literally cleared the benches for this fight." And the guy that watched it at home, we'll call him Bob, would be like, "No, you're not telling me the truth. I'm not going to believe the eyewitness. I'm going to believe what the TV people showed me." And that's a metaphor for life.
Yeah. No, well, because you feel like you're the eyewitness when you're watching it on TV.
That's right.
And so
Yep.
then you're telling me I'm a liar for my
Yeah,
eyewitness, but guess what?
exactly.
Like editing is a thing, you
Yes,
know? And I played
absolutely.
hockey myself in high school and everything. So,
Yeah.
and I've been a part of a bench clearing fight. So I can vividly imagine how
Yes.
that goes.
And the crowd gets into it, and
Yeah,
yes. Yep.
absolutely. So, man, so then you took this, but like how long were you in TV and all of this until it was like, "Hey, I'm gonna back out of this and do this podcast now?" Or
Yeah.
was there kind of like a blend for a little bit?
But yeah, that was, and it wasn't by choice. So a lot of creative people that work in the industry during their day, they can, their 8 to 10 hours or whatever they're working, they get a lot of those creative juices out. And so they come home and they don't do video production or TV production on the side. I get it. Some do. A lot of people don't because it's their 9 to 5 now, and it's not,
Mhm.
they're not going to do it in the evenings or weekends. And so it was 10 years before I had my first job with benefits after college. So there was a lot of freelance and finding other things to do to pay the bills. And then on the last TV station that I was working at, you work your way up. And so you work your way up in title and you work your way up in salary, and eventually you become too expensive. And so that's what happened to me. And so that was my opportunity to say, "Hey, hon, we had 5mpodcast.com as a web domain where we were writing articles, doing blog posts, and we knew we always wanted to get to the audiovisual stage. So we would buy a microphone here or something else along the way, building up to that. When my
Mhm.
position was terminated at the end of 24, that was just the perfect opportunity for us to use some savings and some freelance work and some other things like that to, bootstrap what people see today of 5 a.m. podcast.
That's awesome. So, I mean, it's also a leap of faith in jumping into that though,
Well,
because
yes.
yeah, yeah. Because I've been there where it's like "Hey, we're gonna make a bold move here, honey." And yeah, but miraculously, when God's in it, I was really surprised to know God was in a bold move that I made one time, and the confirmation came because my wife was good with this, which normally anybody else would be like, "Bro, this is a dumb idea." Right? But just knowing that God was there with the peace in it and everything, and so I'm sure that that was kinda similar where it's like, "Hey, honey, this looks like the time."
Yes. Well, that old song, "I'm Diving In." I don't remember who did that song. It's a Christian single from back in the day of just diving in. And we've made a few decisions in the past like that, not having children. We were a little bit more mobile and could take some bigger risks that other couples wouldn't have been able to take because of the other mouths to feed. And so we had a bit more or a lot more risk tolerance. And so we just wanted to jump in and make it happen. And the world talks about a safety net. And so I don't want it to sound cliche, but we really had to shut up with our faith in the Lord and use him as
Hmm.
a safety net and an expectation that he would supply for all of our needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus. And we've found that to be true over and over and over again. And, 5 a.m. podcast, it says in the Bible that unless the Lord builds a house, those who build it labor in vain, or they labor
Hmm.
in vain who build it. And so we know that we need the Lord's help in these endeavors to reach people with 5 a.m. podcast and make it a success. And how can you get a better business partner than the Lord?
No, absolutely. Um, Now, what do you think were some of your biggest takeaways from your broadcast days that really kind of helped launch you into this? I'm sure get a good camera, of course, I can automatically think, but I'm sure that there's some other things that you really learned that maybe other people aren't naturally
Yes.
thinking about.
Well, the consistency and the discipline
Mm,
and great audio. Those would be like the top three things because you absolutely have to be consistent. You have to keep showing up even when you don't want to. And I realize, people that are on sport teams or other high level things, you need that discipline to keep going, to stay in the game. You need that consistency of showing up regardless of what it's looking like. We used to live in the Pacific Northwest, and I was managing and working on residential construction projects. And if we said that we weren't going to go to work because it was raining, there'd be months
mm.
of not
Yeah,
showing up to the
I've been up
job
there.
site. And so you just have to show up. You've got to make that decision of I'm going to do my part. God will do his part. My wife's going to do her part, and we will do what we can to see this vision fulfilled. So it's the persistence and resilience and seeking the Lord for wisdom and connection too. Yep.
Mhm. So 5 a.m. podcast, talk to us about what's your primary premise? What do you feel, your big catch, your big thing on that is, and then talk us through some of your favorite episodes that you've done so far that have, or even maybe ones that you're just like, I can't believe we just did this episode because I got blown away from whatever it was.
Yes. Well, I'll start to answer that with saying that I love old books, and I'm not the fastest reader necessarily, but I do love to read, and especially love to read older books. And so Napoleon Bonaparte, well, he was not an author that I know of, maybe he did write something, but he said that leaders are dealers in hope. And there's
Mm,
also the phrase of leaders are readers. And I knew that to be true in leading television production crews or construction crews, other things like that. And so, because Dynamite Bonaparte said that leaders are dealers in hope, we wanted to be able to give hope with 5 a.m. podcast. And in the book of Proverbs, it says that he who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. And so in late 2018, early 2019, when we bought 5ampodcast.com, we needed some hope and some refreshing. And so we thought, well, if we do that for other people, then the Lord is gonna his creation, his character is going to cause that same refreshing and that same hopefulness to come into our lives. And
mhm,
so that's how our mindset was at the time of starting 5 a.m. podcast and wanting it to be stories of transformation and stories of tips and tricks on how to get out of a rut or how to change our mindset. So identifying stinking thinking and getting some mind renewal and not having that carnal mind, but having a spiritually focused foundational mind. So those were some of the early things that we wrote about because we knew that all of what we want to acquire in this life, we actually need a good spiritual and mental foundation with which
mhm,
to grow and build and leave a legacy and be found to be a good steward. And that Bible verse of well done, good and faithful servant, that's something that my wife and I talked a lot about through our years of especially being married, but dating too. We dated for 4 years before we got married, and we've celebrated our 30th anniversary. So
Congratulations.
praise the Lord for that. But we needed to have a spiritual foundation, and we knew if the Word of God was true, it was true for everyone, not just some.
Mhm,
And so through 5 a.m. podcast, we get to bring stories of transformation And not everything is Christian based. We're certainly Christian people creating something that will last for this time, but also eternity. And we've had some great stories of we had a fellow who had a high level job, became a consultant, traveling, making a lot of financial wealth for his family, but then he ended up being diagnosed with cancer
Mm.
in his early 50s. And he had a choice at that time if that was going to be a death sentence or if he was going to have a life sentence instead. And so he ended up traveling the world and having some great physical adventures in his life. So that was a great one. Another fellow grew up as a musician, alcoholic, into the pharmaceuticals, developed his own program for overcoming addiction, and he's written some books. He sails, lives on his sailboat down in Panama, and had some great sailing adventures. And I love sailing and being on the water. So that was another great one. And then business ones too. We've had Bill Gray was a guest we had on. His whole career. His career has been longer than my wife and I have been married. And he's probably 20 years my senior. And he's been into mentorship and developing mentorship programs for large companies, and just talking about the importance of that legacy and building a foundation and then replicating that through mentoring and passing that information on and those skills and that mindset on to the next generation. Yeah, there's just been we've got one coming up that's with an expert in mergers and acquisitions. And that is, like, to me, that almost sounded like watching paint dry, but it's a great thing to stretch that neuroplasticity that we all have in our brains, to realize that people are coming on the show, much like yours. They're coming on and they're sharing their experiences. They're sharing their cautionary tales. They're sharing their wins and their hits and their misses and those body checks into the boards that almost broke their spleen but didn't, and how they survived. And I remember a very good friend of mine in fifth grade uh, would say, "He who runs away lives to fight another day."
Hmm.
But if you're a trained soldier and you rely on your training, you're still going to live to talk about it. So yeah, that's basically the Just of 5 a.m. podcast. And I love early mornings and sunrises and sunsets, and so that's where that whole theme of time and sunrises and sunsets comes from. Is growing up on the farm and being up at the crack of dawn to feed those animals.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely more of an early bird myself. That I learned that from being in a military home and then military myself and everything. Early mornings, and that's always like, I don't know, it seemed to be this like badge of honor that anybody that's been in the military always says we get more done before 9 a.m. Than most people do all day, all that kind of thing. And I'm sure that that also mirrors quite a bit of farm life as well. Like, you guys get a lot done early. I'm in South New Jersey, and a lot of people wouldn't think New Jersey has farms. Like, yeah, we have a lot of blueberry farming and everything down here, and so very agriculture. I never grew up on one, but I have a lot of friends that are on farms and have farms right now, and so a lot of what you're telling me on that as well is just, yep, that's what my friends talk about, all the same thing of everything. And so, man, so this podcast, dude, I look forward to like diving in a little bit more. I was checking out your website and things of that nature, and you've got some other stuff on your website as well, talking about stock trading and stuff. Is this another hobby that you like to do? Kind of diving into the financial sector a little bit. I know I was like, man, I'm gonna surprise him with this one.
Good, thank you. I love that stuff.
Hmm.
I love it because to me it's like can I find the diamond in the rough?
Mm,
And there's that whole risk factor behind it. And
yeah.
I had some great teachers who taught me some good things about stock trading and even crypto trading. And one of the things that I probably love the most about trading stocks and trading crypto is you completely have to remove emotion out of
Yes.
it. Like, you completely have to, like, throw your emotion out the window. There's no room for it. You absolutely need uh to I was thinking about some of the books that I was reading. You don't have to do all of the research that books like One Up on Wall Street, Peter Walsh, great book. And I'm not going to do 95% of maybe what Peter Walsh suggested in that book. But there's other things of being able to look at the fundamentals and what the charts are telling you and what market cap and volume is telling you. Like all these videos that are up on my social media feed about XRP doing some sort of moonshot to like the stratosphere, not going to happen. I don't care who the person is. They could be a prophetic minister. I don't know what their title is, but I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, not going to $10,000, not going to $10. And it has to do with that market cap. And in order for a price to go up like that, like that's how much money has to come, like physical currency or other tokens has to come into XRP. Like the amount of volume to chew through the order book to even like it's probably $1.34. I didn't check today. This afternoon. I don't remember what XRP was running at. Maybe
I'm not
$1.30
sure. I've been
something.
dabbling and looking into that stuff too, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure what XRP is sitting
So
at.
ladies and gentlemen, so there's an order book for every stock. So that order book is the market depth. That's what we would call it in stocks. And so it's how many bids and how many asks are on either side of this ledger, the buyers and the sellers. And people will say, well, one is fighting against the other. And that's how they kind of talk about prices going up and down and volume and things like that. And so I know that people would love those Cinderella stories, but with their favorite token or stock.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I learned early on, and so this would be, let's say late 90s, early 2000s, something like that, so there's a finite number of stocks in a company. There's a finite number of Bitcoin that there's going to be, and there's a finite number of gold, silver, and cash that we have right now. And so back in the day before crypto, people would trade their fiat currency for a stock. So they would give somebody their hard-earned dollar bills for IBM stock or Coca-Cola or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They would no longer have the money in their account. They would instead have stock from a corporation in their account. And this is why we would see like exchange rates back then, let's say between Canadian dollar, US dollar, or other things, other currencies, and they flow, right? So they're currency.
Mm-hmm.
So they flow like the current in a river. And you would see them go up and down, especially when there was like big buy-ins of IPOs that would come out. And so there's even people, ladies and gentlemen, on the back end, before a company goes onto the stock market going public, there's people that have written the paper and they have warrants where they've bought at a great discounted deal to put money into the company so that it can function and actually get to the IPO stage. And, if you think of junior mining companies, speculative plays like that, the people that are making the money are the ones that have written the paper on that small mining company or some tech company or medical company. And they're just going to exercise their warrants and sell out when all the money comes running in. So remember, the people give up their fiat currency that they receive from their paycheck for this stock. And that money goes to the people that were in the stock before them. And so we have to be very wary of what we're going to invest in, what we're going to put our time, treasure, and talents into. And so I love the stock trading and the crypto trading because it's really, I guess to me, it's kind of like golf, because your opponent in golf is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There is the course, that's part of it, but it's yourself. And so same thing with stock trading and crypto trading, of kind of the opponent is actually me. Am I going to get over my fear to jump in on this trade? Am I going to do it emotionally and lose money because I made emotional choices? Is the tale as all this time. And then we get into, one of my stockbrokers many years ago would say, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. That is true. That is true. I've gotten fat and I've gotten slaughtered in the stock markets because I've been a hog instead of a pig. And so the idea behind that, of you learn to sell on signals, like if you're day trading or some swing trading, something like that, you don't trade on emotion, you're trading on signals. And if the signal tells you to sell, you sell and you take your profits. And that is something else that Donald, the fellow that was a phenomenal stockbroker for us, and he was a day trader. And he would often talk about, you're just taking your profit. Who cares what it does after you take your profit? Because you're happy, you got your profit, and on you go, looking for that next target. And so I would recommend, I can't give financial advice because I'm not a financial advisor,
Right,
but
right.
ladies and gentlemen, look to the signals, look to the indicators. And that metaphor works for every component of life. Not living on emotion, but living on the indicators. And yeah, and happy to
No,
talk more
there's
about it, but I know that was a very long answer. So
no, no, no. It's good because I've been doing that a lot more in my life is like looking at stocks, understanding that. I actually had a meeting earlier today with my financial advisor and all that, and just talking about the differences in mindset. But the number one thing, whether it's long term holding on to stocks for retirement and growth, or it's day trading, or even in between, like I'm going to hold on to this for a year or so and hopefully it grows there and then move around. Any of those three mindsets all have to be emotionally like neutral, or otherwise you
yes,
cannot you play off your emotion, you're gonna get hurt. It's gonna it's not gonna be a fun day for you. And that's one of the things I think I keep hearing over and over from any advisor about any of this stuff is go with the numbers, go with the strategy, go with like all these things, keep your emotions out of the game. If you do, it's ugly. And I think we do that a lot in life when our faith tells us not to, we're to die to ourselves. We're not to be operating out of our emotion all the time. Now, emotions can be great when we're talking about relationships between us and our wife, and we want to feel the joy and the love of the Lord and all that kind of stuff. But man, when things are hard, when times are tough, when pennies are getting pinched, that's the worst time to ever feel or go with your emotions on anything is always my understanding. And so now I'm just learning about it and I just see you shaking your head and it's just confirmation of like, yep, don't do that. And definitely in the markets. Don't do that.
that's right. And I have an excellent book recommendation, but Jesus said in the Bible, I think it was Jesus that said, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Might be somebody else in there. There's no emotion involved in that. We overcome by the something that's been done for us, the blood of the Lamb. And the word of our testimony is either our own personal experience or it's the words of scripture. So those are like the
Hmm.
indicators that we would use. So you might, RSI and the Klinger oscillator and some other things like that. People like different things, but there's a book called Reminiscence of a Stock Operator. It was originally written in 1923 by Edwin Lefevre, and that is an all-time stock trading book. If there's younger guys or gals out there, or whatever age, it doesn't matter. If you have a desire to learn about trading stocks, Reminiscence of a Stock Operator by Edwin Lefevre, or Lefevre. Lefevre is his last name. And you can find it. It's still in print. It's still for sale. And there's a lot of great books and a lot of bad books, just like with everything else. And a lot of advisors too. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that's good stuff, man. All right. As we kind of wrap up, one of the things that we always kind of bring up a little bit is for our viewers, what are some of your, one of the things of the podcast that's always been a deal with me. And when I was growing in the Lord, I would get advice from like pastors and stuff. Oh, you just need to open your heart to the Lord. And it's like this vague feelings, emotional kind of instruction. And I'm like, I'm a guy that works with my hands and, I'm a military guy, you're a farmer, I'm expecting if I do this, I get this result. And so I don't know how to open my heart up physically, right? I've learned how to do that now in my walk, but what are some tangible physical things that our audience can take away for their benefit, whether it's walking with the Lord or anything else?
Yes. Because we do get really unknown answers. Ambiguous might be the term.
Hmm.
Of, "Oh, you have to open your heart to the Lord." Well, what does that mean? Okay, so we learn along the way of how and why somebody would put those words together to say, "This is what you have to do." But really, when we make a commitment to ourselves that we're gonna do something. So you think of the military, something that I didn't do in my career, but I know that there's ranks, I know that there's boot camp, I know that do I volunteer for stuff or not volunteer? Everybody says don't volunteer for anything. But you make you're shaking your head. I've heard terrible stories of what happens after you volunteer for something, but I don't know if there's a payoff. However, I say all of that to say that we make a commitment that we're going to do something. And so then if I'm going to get into something, I want to do it to win. I want to do
Hmm.
it to succeed and have a story and have a legacy. And so with Christianity, reading the Bible and praying, first off, making that a priority in our day. Somebody when I was much younger, but even before college, would say, make it your breakfast and love God best. So of all the things you love God best, and then spend time in his word, because he talks like he writes and he writes like he talks. And so we can find a Bible translation or version that speaks to us. And then eventually I need a little bit more than this. So I need to go into something a little bit deeper. And you go from maybe New Living or easy to read version to, into some deeper ones or some older ones. Because of the older ones, man, they've got some words that can really unlock a lot of meaning that we don't always get. And so the Bible talks about how we go from just drinking milk, and they didn't have pablum back then, but having baby food that's soft, like cream of wheat or oatmeal. And then we get into finding out that there's actually steak on our plate, and there's other things that we have to chew on and meditate on. And one of the things about different physical body parts are also talked about in the Bible. And one of the things that were wisdom and teeth have a correlation, because you have to chew on things and you have to meditate on things and think about why these words were made. And a great example of this that I know it's still pertinent to what you're saying about that, getting the thing of open your heart to the Lord, but that's really Bible reading and prayer and loving God first above all other things. And so that's how our decisions are made. If I've committed to love God first, then my decisions that I make now are going to be under that lens or in that equation. And so there's a Bible verse that says, it's 3 John 2. Beloved, I wish above all things that you prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. And some translations water that down because they don't want to be connected to what they call the prosperity gospel. I totally get it. But if you read that verse, and you can find this online, ladies and gentlemen, the Wycliffe Bible translation in modern English, and you read 3 John 2. And if people thought that, beloved, I wish above all things that you would prosper and be in health. So if people thought that was provocative, if they were to see what John Wycliffe wrote for 3 John 2, they would really have a hard time, because prospering and being in health does not even convey what John Wycliffe wrote in 3 John 2. And so when you think about how Jesus said he came to give life and to give it, well, some places say to give it to the full, that does not even start to paint the picture of what Jesus was actually talking about I've come to give you abundant life. And so a little homework for all of you is to find online John Wycliffe version in modern English and read 3 John 2, and then study those individual words. So it talks about studying to show ourselves approved. And so that's just like, it's more than opening yourself up to what God has for you. It's actually like diving into the words, that have been given to us, so that we can kind of have our doors blown off by the things that are in the scriptures and that are available to us. And people can only give us the light that they have, and we can only walk in the light that we have. So if you're trying to walk this walk of faith and the road seems dim, it's not quite light enough, who's bringing the light into your life? And then you got to go to God, the ultimate light source and life source, and get some more light on.
Yeah, no, man, that's good. I think that talking about going into deeper Bible study and looking for that's really big. And I know some other areas I like going are like blueletterbible.org, because you can get into the original Hebrew and Greek of everything as well, and dive in and why has the Bible never stopped being one of the most studied books of all time? Well, it's because we can keep pulling out of it. So absolutely. Michael, thank you so much for being on here. I will definitely have your website, the podcast, all of those links. And I think even some of the even the specific podcasts that you were talking about, and see if I can find those links.
Sure.
And so I'm going to put them in the description below for everybody as well. And so absolutely dive into that. Check out also the 5 a.m. podcast and all that Michael has as well over there. Thank you so much for being on here, brother.
Man, thanks for having me. It was a delight.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was a delight for me as well. Loved it. But thank you guys again. Take care. God bless. And don't forget, make sure to have valor, which is courage in the face of adversity to go after the vision that God has for you. Have a blessed day. Take care.